This is data from lactic acid. The top graph, figure 1, shows blood lactate profile while doing a VO2 max test. As you can see by the bottom line, the lactate stays at a steady increase until it gets to the speed of 12 kilometers an hour. This is because the individual is working hard but not too high. So when the line rapidly increases, the speed will only be able to go up 3 more times. This is because the individual has accumulated so much lactate that their fatigue is too high and they are unable to carry on. This is because they are unable to remove sufficient amounts of lactic acid to be able to carry on. Graph below, figure 2, which shows OBLA, which is onset blood lactate accumulation, and it shows for different sports. So it shows for a sprinter, a middle distance, and a marathon runner. A sprinter will reach their OBLA much quicker than a marathon runner. This is because during a 100-meter sprint, you need to be much faster than a marathon runner. Moreover, sprinters are unaware of their OBLA. OBLA occurs around 4 millimoles, and lactic acid occurs around 1 to 2 millimoles. Sprinters and middle distance runners are more likely to train for lactate intolerance. This is because they will not be going into their lactic acid system for very long, for it to cause a huge problem for their performance. On the other hand, marathon runners are trained to avoid their OBLA, because if it builds up within the first few minutes of a marathon, it will have a huge effect on the performance. Therefore, while training, they are able to work out their OBLA and at what speed it occurs. And this will be a given advantage to them in a race, as they'll be able to work out their speed and intensity, and they'll be able to work for harder and longer if they're working at that OBLA. This is because different individuals will have different OBLA, and they'll be able to train to make their OBLA better and work for longer before hitting it. 20% of oxygen consumption during exercise is converted to mechanical work, whereas 80% ends up as heat. Most heat is dissipated through sweat, vasodilation, and the hairs on your arms and your skin flattening. Sweat. So this is when the water particles will be on your skin surface and they'll evaporate. So this will cause a whipping away of the water by the wind. However, it's less easy to do this if you're in humid conditions. So, for example, if you're running a marathon in the desert. Another way is vasodilation. This is when blood is sent to the surface of your skin by your blood vessels widening. This is to release as much heat as possible. Also, the hairs flattening on your arm means that air is not becoming trapped. When you are cold, your hairs will rise up. This is so that air can be trapped in the middle of your head and they can be warmed up. Hypothermia is when your core temperature goes above 37 degrees Celsius. This is bad because the enzymes in your body won't be able to work like they normally do. Enzymes work best at an optimum. Therefore, their optimum is 37 degrees Celsius. Hypothermia affects the central and peripheral processes involved in production of muscle, force, and power. Therefore, if you're too hot, your muscle force and your power will be decreased. Body hydration is also a very important part of heat. So, if you sweat a lot because you're hot and you're sweating to get all the water out of you so you can become cooler, the more sweat you lose, you risk dehydration. So while running a marathon, the average person loses about a litre an hour. However, at the drink stations, they don't top up with that litre that they've lost. Therefore, it's very important they stay hydrated, otherwise they will become very dehydrated. This can cause the individual to collapse or become very faint and dizzy. If an individual is going to do a marathon in the desert, they will definitely become acclimatized to that climate before they go out there. This could be, they could be sitting in there with an ice jacket on to reduce their core temperature. They could sit in an ice bath or have an ice drink. This all will cool your inner core temperature. This graph shows how different sports are affected by hydration. As you can see by the green line, the high intensity performance, even if you're a tiny bit dehydrated, your work intensity will drop from 100% to 55%. So this means that you've lost 45% of your maximum performance just because you're a little bit dehydrated. This can affect all sorts of sports performers, as their performance will drop very low if they become dehydrated. For example, if you're playing a football match, you may start very hydrated and working at a good level of intensity and a good performance. However, you may become very dehydrated towards the second half of the game, and then this will decrease your performance a lot. Also, if you're sprinting, which is a high intensity performance, and you're slightly dehydrated, your performance will drop 45%, which means you won't be able to run your fastest time. Now I'm going to talk about neuromuscular fatigue. This is the depletion of acetylcholine, reduced in calcium ions, and nerve impulse transmission. This photo shows a neuromuscular junction where acetylcholine is carried in vesicles. They release acetylcholine across the synaptic cleft where they go to the receptors and then sends an impulse through to the muscle fibers. But if insufficient acetylcholine arrives at the receptor sites, then nerve impulses will not send across the muscle fibers. Impulses will only send if it's above a certain threshold. If it doesn't reach the threshold, then the muscle contraction will not be able to take place. Once the acetylcholine has done its job, it needs to be reabsorbed. The enzyme that breaks it down is cholesterol. The problem of this is that there may not be enough of the enzyme to clear the acetylcholine. If acetylcholine is not cleared from the synaptic cleft, then the muscle contractions cannot happen. If there is too much acetylcholine, then it won't be ready for the next impulse, and therefore will cause fatigue. Calcium is needed for the muscles to be able to contract, as the calcium binds with troponin to make the sites available so that cross bridges can form. However, tired, fatigued muscles may leak calcium ions. This is because, as the muscle becomes more fatigued, there is an increase in the concentration of hydrogen, which increases the acidity and decreases the pH. As a result, this decreases the calcium that is released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The decrease weakens the contractions, therefore, people lose the ability to generate strong, powerful contractions of the muscles. The bottom photo shows an axon. The impulses jump from each myelinated sheath into the nodes of Ranvier. This causes a wave of depolarization. An increase of concentration of the hydrogen increases the acidity and decreases the speed at which the fibers can conduct impulses, and as a result, the peak of the twitch will be lower, as you can see from the top graph. The peak will be lower as the strength of contraction will be lower. Also, the frequency of the impulses going to the fibers are reduced, which will decrease the speed at which the muscles contract. A combination of everything will result in a decrease of force. Fast glycolytic fibers will get tired quickly, so for example, an individual running a 100-meter race will use fast glycolytic muscle fibers. And because they are using their fast glycolytic muscle fibers, they have a much higher fatigue. Therefore, the individual will only be able to work at a high intensity for a very short duration of time. Therefore, during a football game, individuals will only be able to have short bursts of sprinting as the fast glycolytic muscle fibers get tired quickly. That's why they're most likely to use slow oxidative muscle fibers, as they don't fatigue as quickly as fast glycolytic.